are back, everybody. Well, in the fight against climate change, so many companies are claiming to be sustainable, maybe just in order to get our money. But how do we know which claims are real and which companies are doing this thing called greenwashing?
Well, here to make us more informed and sustainable consumers is Calvin Lackin, a research scientist at York University's Faculty of Environmental Studies. Calvin, great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being here. All right, so this is a very important conversation. So let's just start with breaking it down, the basic thing of what is greenwashing.
So greenwashing is when a company or product makes deliberately misleading or false claims surrounding the environmental performance or sustainability of the product. So essentially a company says, this is much better for the environment than it really is. And this is really problematic because it actually undermines public faith and trust in other sustainability claims. So imagine if you're an eco-conscious consumer and you're trying to do the right thing and you're trying to buy sustainable products, and then you find out you were lied to. That can really be discouraging and actually result in something called cognitive dissonance, where you decide not to engage in the behavior at all.
Okay. There are a lot of companies that are doing this, and a lot of the tactics we see is through language or terminology. So how do the words that we see on product labels, how do those words contribute, or are they actually doing the greenwashing?
Yeah, so terminology is one of the first lines of attack when it comes to how consumers and businesses interact. And we often ascribe value characteristics to certain terms. So things like organic or natural, we perceive them to be more sustainable. The reality is these are just words, and without context, they don't mean very much. Companies know this, and so they'll deliberately use ambiguous but superficially appealing language like eco-friendly and zero waste. Things that sound good, make us feel good, but we don't really understand what it means. And they actually exploit that lack of understanding and our goodwill.
All right, so let's go through a few of those terms so we can understand better as consumers. The first one is plastic-free. When we see that, what should we keep in mind?
So plastic-free is a very complicated issue. So whether a plastic is good or bad is very much context dependent. And oftentimes the alternative to plastics, we don't fully paint a complete picture of what those environmental impacts are. And a really good example of this is paper versus plastic bags. We assume paper is better. Most studies actually show that paper bags have a significantly larger environmental footprint when compared to single-use plastic bag.
No way.
Yep. In some cases, a paper bag can use 50 times more water when compared to the single-use plastic alternative. And you'd have to recycle that paper bag multiple times before you achieve what we call carbon neutrality with the plastic bag. So companies use the term plastic-free, thinking that we'll assume that this is better for the environment.
Well, that's what they told us.
But sometimes the hard reality is that plastic is actually the most sustainable option, depending on context. Everything is context dependent.
Okay.
Weird. That's only the first term.
That's the first one.
Next term is a big one, carbon neutral or net zero. In the era of like emissions, what does this mean?
So carbon neutral, net zero are classic greenwashing terms. And I think when people hear it, they assume, oh, this product or company is no longer generating emissions. In reality, what they're doing is carbon offsetting, where they're paying somebody else for having reduced their carbon footprint. So they're buying their way out of the problem instead of actually changing their own behaviors. And where offsets can become very problematic is that sometimes it's not even overseen by a certification body. So you're buying kind of fake offsets and the entire premise is fraudulent in nature.
I buy airline carbon offsets. Oh, that's a whole other segment. Never mind.
Never mind. No, Melissa. Okay, so let's go into our next term, recyclable. This one seems pretty standard, pretty easy.
You would think so, but you know,
Calvin.
Products, you'll see recyclable and compostable on products. But what people don't understand is that it doesn't necessarily mean that you can divert it in your jurisdiction. And so the key takeaway for consumers is that there's very few universal truths when it comes to recycling. What can be recycled is entirely a function of where you live. What gets accepted in Toronto may not get accepted in Edmonton. And just because you see that recycling logo doesn't mean that if you put it in the bin, it's going to be recycled.
Like diapers. Diapers are compostable in some jurisdictions.
And not in others.
And not in others.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
I'm blown away.
Mine is blown. Okay, so is there no evidence required? Like when you make a statement and you're a business, we, I think, get duped thinking, well, if you say it's eco-friendly, somebody must be holding you to this. Nobody can just slap that on a label, can they?
Well, for a long time, it really was like that. So companies, it was like the Wild West. Companies could make claims, and unless somebody took them to court, which rarely happened, there was very little means of recourse. That changed, however, when Keurig Canada was charged $3 million for a recycling campaign that said their coffee pods were as easy to recycle as they were to enjoy. What they didn't tell people is that it could only be recycled in 2 areas in all of Canada. So Canadians were putting their coffee pods in their blue bin thinking that they were recycling, when in reality, it was just contamination. And so this penalty actually set this really great legal precedent, because now companies know that they have to verify their claims, and legislation and regulations are coming into place that say, hey, the proof has to be in the pudding. If you put something on a package or you make a claim, we will come after you if it's false.
Okay, but that's not happening yet.
It's happening very fast.
Okay, it is happening.
So legislation and regulation is already in place. The Canadian Standards Association is already developing language and terminology about how do you address this. So I wouldn't say it's fully in place. It's actually jurisdiction specific,
Okay.
Yeah.
but it is happening.
Okay, so Calvin, armed with all this great information you've just laid down on us and we're all still digesting it, are there any certifications we can trust and look out for?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a couple of certifications, and the most important thing is what we call third-party certifications. So FSC, which is the Forest Stewardship Council, they are the gold standard when it comes to paper and forest products. It means that an independent auditor has ensured that these forests are being managed economically, environmentally, and socially responsible ways. We also have the Energy Star symbol. So I'm sure all of you guys have seen that on appliances and microwaves.
Yeah.
When you see Energy Star, it means that product uses less energy and produces less emissions, and that is verified and certified.
Love.
If you like coffee, there's the Fair Trade and Rainforest Alliance. So this ensures that the coffee beans are being sourced in sustainable and particularly socially sustainable ways. And once again, it all comes back to third-party verification. Certifications cost money. And so when a company invests in a certification, you know that they're being serious about the claims that they're making.
Okay, we only have a few seconds left. So we're watching and we're like, but we want to try to do the right thing. So how do we behave as consumers? What do we do?
So this might all sound very discouraging, but the first thing is be a skeptical consumer. Don't let companies make the decisions or thinking for you. Ask questions. When you see claims, look it up yourself and kind of seek out your own verification. The last thing is, the most sustainable thing you can do is to not buy a product at all. And if you do buy a product, buy durable instead of disposable. Something that lasts will beat something that is single use every single time. And that is the most sustainable action that people can take.
Good
Love
information.
that.
Mind-blowing.
Calvin, a lot to think about. Thank you, as always, for breaking it down for us. We really appreciate it,
Thank you
especially
so
in a
much
way
for
that
having
we
me.
can understand. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so,
you.
so much. Wow.
Hey, you, come a bit closer. We've got so many more must-see interviews, spicy debates, lifestyle tips, and pop culture moments. So subscribe to our channel by tapping the logo below and don't miss out.